Clearly, I am a because I am ready to react to 1-star review for my favorite book. I have a lot of favorite books, but I only chose 3 because if not, we're going to be here for a very long time. Starting with The Poppy War by RF Kuang. Absolutely adore this book. This book is a historical fantasy novel that is inspired by the Sino-Japanese War, where we follow a young girl, Rin, who is a war orphan and has been treated abysmally by her family, and thus decides that her way out is for her to get into an elite military academy. But when she gets there and war breaks out in her country, it is up to her to either save her world or bring it and burn it down to ashes.
Yes, Rico. Kaboom.
Of course, there's a bit of gods, there's a bit of shamanism. You get it? I absolutely adore the series. Trigger warning though for a lot of things because, like I said, this is inspired by real life historical events. So trigger warning for war, for gore, for blood, for torture, for murder, for the brutal killing of people, especially children who are still unborn, and for rape. So yeah, but I really do love this book. Absolutely adored it. This is one of my favorite books, and I would always talk about it. It should be noted I was under the mistaken impression that I was reading a YA fantasy while I was reading the academy part. I can see why you would think it's YA fantasy, even though this book is not YA fantasy, but I could see it. Even though I wasn't enjoying the book by then, I wanted to continue reading. I give it a chance to improve because representation matters, even if flawed. And I did love Harry Potter and Alana when I was younger.
That doesn't make sense.
What has Harry Potter got to do with Poppy War? Like, there is no connection. One goes to Hogwarts, which is a school, but it's not a military academy, right? Okay, I can get where you would see the similarities in the sense that they are both orphans, right? But Harry Potter is still a white boy. Yes, is an orphan, but he's still a white boy who comes from a prestigious family, even though he was abused and maltreated. Yes, I can see that connection with Rin. But see, the difference is that he was elevated to a position when he got to Hogwarts, and Rin did not get that experience. In fact, she was mocked for being a country girl. She was mocked for her accent. She was mocked for the fact that she was darker skinned because colorism was still front and center in the school. And of course, she didn't come from any of the noble houses because say what you will, but technically Harry Potter was a big fucking deal. So I don't see the connection. I couldn't understand why Kwong hadn't begun the book with action, with battles or war or something, and fleshed out Rin's background through flashbacks and other devices. See, this is how you know, as a writer, you can't satisfy everybody. Because if she had done that, I can guarantee you that there would have been people commenting about it in the reviews, like, why is she showing us all this story through flashbacks? Why didn't she just take us into the story? And also a core crucial part, the reason why she gave us that everyday establishment of life of how it was meant to be, of Rin's goals and dreams and how she was walking to it, is so that you can understand just how brutal and how much it is that war derails the purposes and plans of people. She had to establish a normal before the war came in to change things. It was important. Yes, it might have affected the pacing of the story, but it was important. It's the same thing that Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie did with Half of a Yellow Sun. We had an establishment of the normal before the Nigerian Civil War kicks in. It makes the tragedy of disrupted lives even more painful. The line between fiction and reality is always blurred. Stories can be truth or fiction, or more likely some shade of in between. For the most violent and brutal events in human history, non-fiction books and documentaries are crucial for remembrance and understanding. Fictionalized takes on these events needs to be handled carefully, but are also important. I've read and watched realistic historical fiction about tragic or violent events, and when it's done right, it's extremely powerful. What makes me uncomfortable with the Poppy War is that it's fantasy. Gods and magic play a large part in the story.
I'm about to end this man's whole career.
Did nobody tell you that this is historical fantasy? Like, historical fantasy. You have a problem with the fantasy part of a historical fantasy novel? Some of the most sickening, abhorrent instances of violence Kwang inflicts on characters in her book are things that happen to real people, as documented in photographs and first-person accounts. Yes, Kwang is incredibly graphic about these details, and she's not using her imagination but rather history to write these scenes. To me, it feels exploitative and extremely tasteless. To use other people's pain to make your fantasy novel more exciting is a line I think shouldn't be crossed. Hold up, let me get this straight. Rebecca is Chinese American. How can you exploit the history of your own people when you're bringing that into your story? Why use the
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Sometimes I think readers, we read way too many books, but we do not read the dictionary often enough. I haven't been this annoyed with the book since The Bells, and like then I see myself in the minority with this one. Basically, we have a generic military fantasy, frustratingly vague setting and historical background. The mythical elements are mentioned when needed to further the plot. Yeah, I get that point because she doesn't really dive into it as much in the Poppy War. She does a lot of it in the Dragon Republic, but if all you read is the Poppy War, I can get this. I can get this criticism. Fang, I Want Power Runin is an unlikable protagonist. See, that's the thing. She's technically not a protagonist. She's more of an anti-hero that is running headlong into being an antagonist. We get little help in understanding her relation to said power. When you say relation to said power, you mean why she wants said power? Because this is a war orphan who has been abused and neglected and is basically about to be sold as a child slave, who then decides to fight back and do everything she can possibly do to get power so that she would never be in that position again. And then she gets into a military academy where she also once again has to deal with the prejudices of her classmates, and then is tossed headlong into a war that sees her country decimated, and basically is once again rebirthing what it is that had led her to being a war orphan in the first place. Is that what you mean?
Congratulations, you played yourself.
My biggest issue with this book is its message. It's anti-women, anti-procreation, it's brutal, and the main character is lazy, drug-addled, and a ruthless killer with no real goal. She isn't a soldier because she has no country or people she's fighting for. She's a vengeful mercenary, making it up as she goes along. I don't know if it occurred to you, but Rain technically didn't plan on being a soldier, and in war, people actually do make shit up as they go along because there is no manual for surviving a war. But the fact that you were all anti-women and anti-procreation already told me where you stand on that point too.
Bye, Felicia.
Second favorite book that I'll be reading 1-star reviews of is The Crow Prince by Oli Black. This is the first book in the Folk of the Air series. I absolutely adore this trilogy. You all can see, if you're like, oh my god, what copy is this, Nora? This is my Illumicrate special edition copy. Can you see that? It's gorgeous. Like, it's stunning. In The Crow Prince, we follow a young girl, Jude Duarte, whose parents are murdered, and then she's dragged from the land of the human world into the land of the Fae by the very same general who killed her parents, and he becomes her father in fairy and trains her to become everything that he knows, and she's dealing with that, clearly the guilt of that, but at the same time she's also quite adapted very well in fairy, to the point that she's become even more Fae than the Fae themselves. Very cunning, very ruthless, also willing to do anything to get what she wants.
I am a strong competitor. I am a fighter. I get done.
As for the book, well, everything was wrong with it for me other than the slight addictive quality it had, which died for me after I passed the halfway point. This book was weak in every sense of the word, from the protagonist to the characters, the plot, and the world building. They just called Jude weak. Okay. The storyline started off quite tragic, with Jude's parents being brutally killed off from the bat. From that, I was expecting some kind of revenge story or emotionally harrowing character development, because to witness that when you're young will obviously take its toll. I agree, and I did think that Oli Black did us a bit of a disservice in how she moved from Jude as a child to Jude as an adult, or rather teenager, an older teenager, because I think this part of what this reviewer wants is probably what we would have experienced in the middle part of it. But by the time the story kicked in properly, Jude had already settled in fairy. I didn't mind, but it would have made the story better for us to get that part. But that was not the story that Holly Black wanted to tell, because this was not a revenge fantasy story.
It is what it is. It is what it is.
Right off the bat, our main character goes on to enter some kind of tournament she has no experience in whatsoever. There's nothing ingrained within her to take on this challenge, no power she embodies intellectually or physically. Whilst it took place, all I kept thinking about was how flimsy the battle was. Neither did it feel complete, just rushed. That was the point. See, you might think that Jude is not qualified, but she does have skills with a sword. She has been trained for it. She was raised by a general. Yes, it's a general that murdered her parents, but she was raised by a general, and she did have those skills. And the reason why she was entering that tournament was so that she could get a boon, because in fairy humans can be compelled, and if it is that she can get that boost to be in a position of respect, because it's core to who Jude is. Jude Duarte throughout the entire book wants to be respected, and that is what drives her character motivation. And when you have that in your mind, you see exactly how the story progressed and how ultimately, even when she's feeling the greatest betrayal, it's the disrespect that gets to her. Thus, this was the narrative the story carried on. Our main character had no proper background that we as readers were exposed to in order for us to connect with. No experience, and neither had she trained to gain any of it throughout the course of the book. Everything was just thrown, characters and world, at the reader, and felt as if we were expected to go with the flow, and further clarification was not given or explained. Event after event took place with no sense of proper progression of the overall plot. No aspect to it whatsoever felt substantial or concrete. I would agree that there was a lot of time jumps and the way in which time flowed, but I personally thought that Oli Black did it purposefully, because time does not flow in a linear fashion in fairy. And if in fairy you can spend a year in fairy and turns out that you've been gone for almost 10 years in the human world, it goes to show that there is a slight shift in perception of time. And I personally thought, like, it might not have been what she set out to accomplish, but
That's my opinion!
first of all, the writing is horrendous. It's the worst case of tell not show I've ever seen. Twilight was better written than this.
Do me a favor, please. Get out of here. Get out of here, man.
For the first 200 pages, she does nothing but complain. Oh, boo-hoo, I'm a human. Boo-hoo, I'm not as pretty, as strong, as fast. My heart bleeds. Yes, because she lives in a society where constantly she's treated as nothing because she's a human. So it makes perfect sense that she would have all those fears and insecurities, because that is also a core part of her character, is what drives her to the decision she ends up taking. But what do I know? And the thing that really gets me going, one of the characters that is hinted at being a possible love interest is abusive, and no one fucking bats an eye in the book or in the reviews I've seen. I'm so done with female, and male for that matter, authors who write abusive love interests and then absorb them of all the shit they've done. In the world of endemic sexual harassment and abusive behavior, the world of #MeToo, and the horrifying stories of women being treated like less than dirt, why do we fall for this type of characters? Why do we keep buying these books? And why do we praise the authors who write them? Multiple exclamation mark. Firstly, I think context is important, and I already stated, I'm certain you also tropes I hate. I hate the bad boy with a tragic past trope. I mentioned it in the tropes I hate, but I did also say I was going to do a video of books I love with tropes I hate, and this would definitely fit for it. I might consider this or something else, because see, you also have to understand context, right? One, the chief of it being that I think a lot of people forget, but the mythology of the Fae is that, you know, they are very fickle, right? They are very capricious. They are very manipulative. They can be very wicked. They can give you all your heart's desire and pain and anguish in one hand and present it to you as a gift, blindfolding you, so you have to choose whichever one that your hand lands on, and that's your luck. That is who the Fae are. That is who they have been. And the thing about Crow Prince is that Oli Black captures that, and that's the reason why nobody really talked about it, or at least personally the reason why I didn't really bring it up in my reviews of it, because when you're reading a story that centers Fae characters, you're not expecting goodness, you're not expecting niceness. They are not fairies with their cute little wings who are always granting you your heart's desires. No, the Fae are wicked creatures, and the book that the Folk of the Air series centers, because it takes place heavily in fairy, these characters are wicked characters. You're not meant to be like, oh my god, Jude is the best person with the kindest heart. No, it's the reason why someone like Vivienne, for example, would do something so horrible to the woman she loves, because of the fact that she is Fae, and she does not consider it like that. That is Vivienne. I'm not saying that Carden did not know what he was doing. He does. There was no sexual harassment. It was just full-on bullying, but there was no sexual harassment in this book, at least with regards Carden and Jude's relationship. But the bullying part is central to the fact that he is Fae, and not just any type of Fae. He is the Prince of Fairy, so he's expected.
Sad but true.
There was absolutely no substance to it whatsoever. There was no world building, no character growth, no interesting writing, no nothing. I do agree. I agree, not with the lack of character growth. I would say that Jude did learn some things, some crucial things about herself, and what she's capable of in Cruel Prince, and is that not character growth? I do not agree with the writing not being interesting, but I agree with the lack of world building. I think that Oli Black worked with the assumption that if you're picking up a book that is marketed as heavily taking place in fairy, then you're someone that has an understanding of how the fairy realms and the fairy world works. For example, no accepting of gifts, always putting salt, always having iron on hand. Like, these are, if you read a lot of fairy books, these are things your brain will automatically help you fill in the blanks in our world building. And I agree that that was a cop out, because if you're someone that has never read anything with the fae and you go into this book, you would be confused. So I agree with the lack of world building, but everything else.
Nope.
Jude wanted power. We are constantly told this throughout the book, but we are never shown her hunger for power. Honestly, this can be the summary of the whole book. Jude, I want power. Me, okay, interesting, but why? Jude, Maddox, I love bloodshed. Me, okay, can you explain why? Carden, I hate Jude and I bully her because I want her. Oh, I am evil too. Me, okay. Yes, there could have been further explanation to their motivations. I think that the book would have benefited if it had been a bit longer, because there were some things that were rushed. But yeah, Jude wants power because she's all her life been powerless. When her parents were killed, when she was dragged to Fairy without her consent, when she had to live in Fairy, when she grew up in Fairy, like powerlessness has been a consistent thread in her life. So I understand her wanting power. Maddox loves bloodshed because he's a general, he's a red cap. That's another thing why I said that Oli Black relies on people that would love this, either have an understanding of Fairy and so can fill in the gaps, or do not care and so would like ignore it. And I agree.
Could have been better.
And finally, this is a recent favorite, but I'm certain nobody's surprised about it. The City We Became by NK Jemisin. This is my very first NK Jemisin, and I love her. I love her writing. I absolutely adore it. And I can, like, this follows the concept of what if it is that city has souls, right? And these city souls are personified by avatars. And what happens when a foreign entity comes into the city in order to kill the city? And all this takes place in the city of New York. I love this book to bits. Idea, call me simple, but I like my stories human, my characters relatable, my conflict engaging. Cities that are midwife through song and afterwards battle Lovecraftian monsters through human avatars. How can I empathize with that, and why should I even care who wins? Imagine knowing what you want in a book and then setting out for a book. Like, didn't you read The Blob? Like, I've always found the inordinate amount of attentions American play to race to be tiresome. But this book just crosses a line. The first thing we learn about every single character is their skin color down to shade and tone. Even single character of color is cool. Every single white character is racist, narrow-minded, prejudiced, and even outright evil.
Wrong.
The girl that was driving the car, is she not white? Is she racist? No. The cop that let Manny in when they got to the station, was the cop not white? Yeah. Was the cop racist? No. The presumption that every single white person in this is racist speaks to your own prejudice and you projecting. Also, imagine the luxury to be able to be like, oh, you all talk too much about race. The monster is white. This is repeated so many times that it almost gets nailed to your brain. I agree that NK Jemisin was a bit heavy-handed and ham-fisted, but still, the book is just the pinnacle of Jemisin's perennial crusade against Lovecraft. And while it was certainly bigoted and xenophobic, and his books are undoubtedly inspired by fear of miscegenation and otherness, it cannot really do anything about it. One, because it's the product of his time and upbringing. Nope. That is implying that there were people during his time that were not decent. And that does a disjustice to people that actually treated people of color during their time with some dignity and respect, which is something that Lovecraft did not do. Two, because he's dead. So, three, because he has been dead for 80 years and dead people cannot apologize, change opinion, or become better persons. I repeat.
So fucking what?
For me, it was the magic system. It gave me literal headaches. I just couldn't sink into them. They made me want to throw my iPod. It's a very, what's the term? Soft magic system. There's no rule whatsoever. Nothing was really explained. It was all feelings. Character A will pick up an object and feel that it will work, but you had used it one way and think, no, that doesn't feel right. Then do it another way and think the same ad nauseum until he figures the right way and think, I have no idea how this will work, but it will. That's the thing, because they actually do not know. You're tossing people who have never used their powers, who have no idea how it works. You're tossing them into, in fact, it's something that Brooklyn mentions, and it's something that Bronca drives, because she's the only character in there that actually has an idea of what their power is and what it's about. But you have people who have zero idea how these things is going to work. They are making it up as they go along, and that was the whole point of that. I'd listened to this for an hour, trying to follow these battles and just get terrible headaches. No book is worth headaches. I'm a DNF this. So that makes sense. That's the reason why you do not actually understand why their powers work the way it does. You did not actually finish the book.
Makes sense.
Speaking of which, the ending happens the same way. We need X to happen to X happens. It's totally unearned. The ending is building up to some kind of huge sitting destroying battle, only to dissolve into a rushed due a machina. I would agree that I think that the final battle was a bit rushed, and the only thing that got me through it was the fact that I felt like it was like a mini boss battle. It wasn't the main boss battle. The main boss battle will probably happen in like book 3, but I did think that it was very convenient, but I also was not sad about the ending because so many things were happening, and I think that if she had actually turned it into a big battle, I would not have felt it as satisfying, because all the players involved have to be at certain points for that final battle to happen, and I didn't think that all the characters were there yet. For example, Island. So I was actually okay with how it ended, but I could see how, like, I did feel it was a bit rushed, and I did feel that some things were convenient. But after thinking about it, I actually do think that the introduction of the new character, it was believable, especially because sometimes you have to recognize the fact that they are city transplants.
You know I'm right.
Yeah, those are 3 favorite books, and that's me reacting to 1-star reviews. I think I spent a lot of time trying to defend, which is to be expected because they are my favorite books, but I hope I was able to pick some parts, like things that I agreed with the review. I hope I was able to call it out. And moving on to my next question, if you've read any of these books, whether Poppy War, Crow Prince, City We Became, if you read either of them, drop in the comments down below what your ratings were for them. Trust me, I'm not going to be mad. I'm not going to be mad, I promise. If you have not read them but have any interest in reading any of them, let me know as well in the comments as well. That is this video. If you liked it, please do not forget to give it a big thumbs up. Check out my other videos. Subscribe if you want to, and if you do decide to subscribe, please click on that notification bell so you can know the minute I have a new video go up. I make new videos every Wednesdays and Sundays at 2 p.m. EST. Yes, that is 2 p.m. EST. I will see you soon. Until then, stay passionate, love books, love yourself. Bye.